Hi, I'm Nikki and this is wearebarnsley.com. Today we're at the Town Hall where the leader of the council, Steve Houghton, has called an emergency press conference to release details about the budget cuts. The Swathing budget cuts mean 1,200 jobs are going to have to be lost at the council over the next few years because it needs to save £40 million.
The position we are working on is currently a forecast position because we don't have the final numbers yet. We've already made this year, or are in the process of making in the current financial year, 181 people redundant. That's a mixture of voluntary and compulsory redundancies, but it is 181 jobs in year that are having to go. What we're now preparing for is the next financial year and beyond. The implications over a 4-year period for the council are we will have to lose 1,200 jobs and we will lose 250 vacant posts. At the moment with 1,500 staff sat there thinking, is that me or not? And they'll not know that until the beginning of January when we actually take decisions. So no budget decisions have been taken yet. These proposals are for consultation with the trade unions and with the staff.
Every single council department will be affected by the budget cuts, and even community services like community support officers and bin collections are having to be looked at.
There will be no department left untouched. Clearly that's going to affect the public significantly. I think one of my big worries is the impact of all this on the local economy. Everyone will be affected. Schools, adult social care, from mending the roads and cutting the grass, as we've heard, safer neighbourhood teams, keeping the community safe and secure. All aspects of the community life will be affected. But the scale of this is way beyond, as I say, just simply managing this out.
The cuts are going to have a wide range of impact in Barnsley, with early indications showing it could result in a downturn of over £100 million to the economy.
We are looking at, by the end of year 4, the economy will have lost something like £100 million activity. So it's not £100 million spent, but it's £100 million in terms of activity that would have generated. It will mean a reduction in support for our schools. It will mean things like community learning being targeted just to the most vulnerable groups. Where we have access for a lot of people into community learning, we'll have to narrow that down to a very small and the most dependent group in there. Potentially a reduction in care packages for older people. Certainly reductions in the frequencies of street cleaning, grass cutting, highways maintenance. I mean, these things, because of the scale of the numbers, we can't avoid those kind of frontline services. We are trying to keep those to a minimum, but nothing's exempt because the numbers are just that big. And you can't take this kind of money out and not affect frontline services. Potentially reductions in numbers in safer neighbourhoods teams. We're going to review the number of libraries we've got in the borough, and ironically when benefits is a huge issue we may have to slow down the way the timescales in terms of how we process benefits and get the money to people because we're not going to have as many staff. Now, obviously this is only the beginning. The current forecasts are we will have to do this again and again, and obviously as we get into that 40 million and those bigger job numbers, the implications become even more draconian. These are without question the biggest reductions in expenditure, the biggest cuts in the council's history. There's no doubt of that, and it will be for all councils. I think everyone accepts there has to be change, and everyone accepts there has to be cuts. Our concerns is this is simply too much, too soon.
Elected council members have already been given a pay cut, and it's possibly on the cards that council staff could volunteer to do the same.
We'll look at all the options that the staff are prepared to discuss with us, so we're going to do that over the next 3 months. Obviously I don't want to prejudge that, and obviously the trade unions have got a big role to play.
We will be taking steps to try to find out their opinion on a more systematic basis. I've heard anecdotes both ways. I've heard some staff saying, why don't we take a pay cut? I've heard others saying that's not the way to deal with it, so we've got to find out where the balance lies really.
Council Chief Executive Phil Coppard says this is the worst round of budget cuts he's known since the 1980s, and Barnsley Council are left trying to get a head start.
And I've worked here since the early 80s, and this feels like going back to the really bad times. I mean, it wasn't. I don't think it was as severe as this even in the depths of the 80s and 90s, this does feel worse than anything we've experienced before.
This is going to be devastating for the Barnsley and the local community and villages around Barnsley. We haven't seen these kind of job losses since the closure of the pits in the 80s, and it's going to be as bad as that for communities. I don't think people realise how bad this is going to be, but they soon will do.
What do you think will be the point where people actually start to take notice?
When their home carers don't turn up, when their elderly parents don't get the treatment and the care that they've had for the last 10-15 years, when their grass, even the grass isn't cut, when stray dogs are roaming the streets because Barnsley can't afford to pay for more pest control officers and things like that. Simple things, but things that people take for granted are not going to get done. And when people look around in their communities, they will be able to visually see a difference, and that's how bad it's going to be.
What can Unison do, and what are you going to be doing over the next few months?
Well, obviously we've got a lobby of Parliament next week to try and get sympathetic Conservative and in particular Liberal Democrat MPs to vote against these measures, because these measures are not needed. You could get the money in other ways. We have an alternative economic strategy that says, you know, the banks put us into this mess and they're going away scot-free. I have never ever, apart from the pit closure programme that the Thatcher government introduced, seen anything on this scale. It's going to be bad. I don't think people realise how bad it is, but they soon will do.